Hello, this is Joe Elias from PennLive, and we are here live at the Old Courthouse in downtown Carlisle.
You don't have to stick with us.
17 years old.
Local high school students have organized a rally in support of gun control
Kyle
measures.
Velasquez, 16 years old. Stephen Curno, 14 years old. Cassie Bernal, 17. Isaiah Scholes, 18.
Crowd
Matthew Texter, 16. Lauren Townsend,
Definitely
18.
more than about 100
John
people
Tomlin,
have
16. Kelly Fleming,
showed
16.
up for the rally. As
Ben
you can
Mouser,
see.
15. Corey DeCruz, 17. Ross Elliott,
Once again, we are at
20.
the
Brian Bloom,
Old Courthouse in
25.
Carlisle.
Ryan Clark, 22.
And across the street
Floyd, 18. Daniel
at the courthouse, a handful of
24.
counter protesters have
Jeremy
assembled
27.
on the
Rachel
steps
Hill, 18. Emily
in opposition
Hudson,
to
19.
any gun control measures.
Matthew Laporte, 20. Jarrett Lane, 22. Henry Lee, 20. Lauren McCain, 20. Daniel O'Neill, 22. Aaron Peterson, 18. Michael Cole Jr., 23. Julia Pride, 23. Mary Karen Reed, 19. Rima Samaha, 18. Leslie Sherman, 20. Maxine Turner, 22. Nicole White, 20. Charlotte Bacon, 6. Daniel Barden, 7. Olivia Engels, 6. Josephine Gay, 7. Dylan Hockley, 6. Madison Sue, 6. Catherine Hubbard, 6. Chase Kowalski, 7. Jesse Lewis, 6. Anna Marquez Green, 7. James Mattioli, 6. Grace McDonald, 7. Emily Parker, 6. Jack Pinto, 6. Noah Posner, 6. Caroline Praviti, 6. Jessica Rakos, 6. FBA Richmond, 6. Benjamin Wheeler, 6. Allison Wyatt, 6. And most recently, Alyssa Alvada, 14. Martin Duke, 14. Nicholas Warrett, 17. James Gutenberg, 14. Luke Boyer, 15. Carol Loughran, 14. Gina Montalto, 14. Joaquin Oliver, 17. Elena Petty, 14. Meadow Pollock, 18. Helena Ramsey, 17. Alex Shaster, 14. Carmen Shetrup, 16. Peter Wang, 15. These are just a few of the victims from 4 of the deadliest school shootings in recent history. It's become pretty predictable now. There's a shooting, then there's media coverage, then there are thoughts and prayers. People say thoughts and prayers aren't enough, and then the other people will say, don't politicize this, these are victims, now's not the time, and the conversation ends. Then the incident repeats. It's kind of like we already know what's going to happen, you know, so we just go through the motions every time. But this time, something feels different. This time, the students are done waiting for the adults to get stuff done. This time, we are saying enough. The friends and families of the victims of the Parkland shooting are speaking up. Tommy Lauren, a conservative political commentator, tweeted, "Can the left let the families grieve for even 24 hours before they push their anti-gun and anti-gun owner agenda? It's not about a gun, it's about another lunatic." One student spoke up replying, "A gun has killed 17 of my fellow classmates. A gun has traumatized my friends. My entire school traumatized from this tragedy. This could have been prevented." Another said, "I was hiding in the closet for 2 hours. It was about guns. You weren't there, you don't know how it felt. This time we're going to get something done. Gun control needs to happen now." We've reached a point in our nation where, in spite of hundreds of innocent lives taken per year, and in spite of facts that say that gun control works, we still have a lot of adults in this country who prioritize hunting and target practice over the lives of children. Many adults have become complacent because they've become so used to saying, it is what it is, and we can't change a thing. They say that gun control in such a gun-loving country is impossible and it's not worth implementing. But for some reason, the kids aren't saying it. Maybe it's that we're still young. and the adrenaline and hormones are out of control. Maybe it's because we haven't been beaten down by the real world over the course of 30, 40, 50 years. Whatever the reason is, it makes us do some crazy things. It makes us do really irrational things a lot of the time. Like, you have probably seen a teenager stay up all night to finish an assignment they just started. They've had a month to work on, right? I've done it, everyone's done it. It's this absurd sense of optimism that drives us to do ridiculous things. But that optimism in the face of overwhelming odds, isn't that the American spirit? Isn't that what drove us to declare independence from a country that had a military that seemed like it could end all of us in a second? Isn't that what brought us from 13 colonies with endless disagreements to one nation with one constitution? It's the same reason we believe that in the face of overwhelming odds, we can pass gun control and we can end the mass shootings. Emma Gonzalez is a senior at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, and she delivered an incredibly powerful speech in response to the shooting. Her speech concluded with this: companies trying to make caricatures of the teenagers these days, saying that we're all self-involved and trend-obsessed. They hush us into submission when our message doesn't reach the ears of the nation. We are prepared to call BS. Politicians who sit in their gilded house and Senate seats, funded by the NRA, telling us nothing could have been done to prevent this, we call BS. They say tougher gun laws do not decrease gun violence, and we call BS. They say a good guy with a gun stops a bad guy with a gun, and we call BS. They say guns are just tools like knives and are as dangerous as cars. We call BS. They say no laws could have prevented the hundreds of senseless tragedies that have occurred, and we call BS. That us kids don't know what we're talking about, that we're too young to understand how the government works. We call BS. And you know what? Right now we're kids. Yeah, we're too young to vote. But we're sitting back and we're watching as our lawmakers fail us every day. Some of us are going to be able to vote. But not all of us. We're not all going to be able to vote in this upcoming election, which is why we need help from adults who want to work with us to use their votes against anybody who stands in the path of gun control. We, the students, call on you, the adults, to help us make something happen. Don't let us down this May during primaries or this November during the midterm elections. Do not let us down. Thank you.
My name is Josetta Checkett, and I am a freshman at Carlisle High School. I grew up knowing that my free, high-quality education is a privilege. In fact, that is the very thing that continues to motivate me through any hardships I may have, knowing that there are so many students out there that do not get the same opportunities as me in the future that I have before me. But this very thing that has been my shining beacon to guide me into adulthood may be the reason I do not make it that far. I, my classmates, and kids across the country may not make it to that future we've been preparing for, just like hundreds of kids before us. For me, school has always been a place that, even if boring at times, was safe. I've been an anxious person my whole life, and contrary to how media often portrays school settings, that anxiety was assuaged when I was there. School is routine. It was the same cycle of comforting repetition day after day. And it was a place to be with people and learn in an environment that it seemed nothing bad could ever happen in. And I did not understand why people did not see things the same way I did. And then, as elementary school wore on, I understood more about this phenomenon that is the school shooting. It came in waves, each new occurrence slowly carefully rocking the constructed shelter I had made school into. I slowly learned what they were, why they happened, but they were still a faraway danger that happened in places like Sandy Hook. They didn't happen here. It was not a problem for me to worry about yet. But I finished elementary school, and I finished middle school, and I am in my first year of high school, and school has lost that glow that my eyes had wrapped it in, a glow that was probably never there. For I have learned that school is not the safe place I always thought it would be. The strangers that scared me on the news as a 4th grader now wear the faces of my classmates and sit behind me 7 hours a day, 5 days a week, 41 weeks a year for 12 long years. That is 12 years of walking through crowded hallways, wondering if I will go home in a school bus or in a coffin. And this is not something I can be okay with. I cannot be okay with the fact that I do not look at the 15-year-old child sitting next to me as a 15-year-old, but as a threat. Because I now know that it is not just a faraway danger. It does not happen in the distant lands of Sandy Hook. It is a very real danger, and it could happen here. I had this very discussion with a classmate of mine a few weeks ago, a boy I know who has multiple guns and takes pride in owning multiple guns. And to quote him, "The Second Amendment to the Constitution gives American citizens the right to bear arms. I'm an American citizen, and if I want to have guns, then that right is mine." What I did not say to him, and looking back, what I wish I had said, is that it is not about those rights anymore. I respect the Second Amendment, but it stopped being about those rights. In fact, it stopped being about those rights the moment Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris shot their first victim at Columbine 18 years ago. It stopped being about those rights when we began huddling inside classrooms with the door locked and the lights off because shootings were such a present danger that our fears were rational. It stopped being about those rights when the price we began paying to maintain them was our lives. Because isn't that what all this is about? Doesn't the right to live trump the right to own a firearm designed to kill multiple human beings? So school can never again be the safe haven I grew up thinking it was. I am grateful for my education, but I am not grateful for what I see happening around me. Children becoming fearful robots, programmed with drills and safety exit strategies. Children losing that little spark inside of them that knows something can be done. There can be a future where we don't cower, we fight. These kids are already victims. We need gun control so school can once again be a place for learning, a place for comfort, and a place where we do not worry about leaving in one piece. We are the first step, but there is so much more to be done. So do not let this movement crescendo here. We must make ourselves heard because we have the power to make something happen, and change must be made because I will not be a statistic. Thank you.
Thanks, Josetta. Next up we have Ellie Park, and she is a mother of 2 and a very well-respected teacher at Carlisle High School. She's been my teacher twice, and she's great. Here she is.
Hi, is this loud enough? Yep. Yeah? Okay, awesome. Hey, I'm gonna ask everybody here to do something that teachers ask kids to do a lot. Would every high school student or student at any school raise their hand right now? If you are a student in a public school, would you raise your hand? Hey, grown-ups, would you look around, please? Would you tell them thank you? Thank you! I have never in my life been more proud. Oh yeah. I have never in my life been more proud of teenagers than I have been in the last 3 months. And I have been proud of teenagers my whole life. I have to say something at the beginning here. I am compelled first to ensure that everyone here understands that while I work for Carlisle Area School District, my statement today is in no way endorsed by or reflective of the views of the district administration or anyone for whom I work. I am not standing here as a representative of Carlisle Area School District in any way. My position holds no bearing on how I run my classroom or engage with my students, and that is true. I speak here as a community member, but not in my capacity as a public educator. For 7 years, I have worked in room 111 of the sports building at the high school. For 7 years, I have taught literature and facilitated learning in that room. And that room has been a constant for me. A warm space with shelves full of books and comfortable chairs and uplifting posters and happy teenagers most of the time. As my students and my lesson plans change and shift each year, as society morphs, my classroom holds steady. But this year, my classroom has changed. I am still settled comfortably in 111, but with some new additions. This year, I spent $15.91 at Home Depot on bungee cords to secure my classroom door from an intruder, and on a hammer to break a window in my classroom so that my students could escape. I spent 57 minutes drafting a plan for who in each class should break that window, how they could safely exit from the second-story classroom to the ground below, and what those who weren't actively escaping should do while students forced their way out the window. I spent $11.17 at Target on magnetic baskets from my whiteboard, where I placed my room keys and my ID badge each day should a student need to be the one to lock the door, while I am helping other students out of the window. Every class knows where I keep my keys and what to do with them in such a scenario. In October, I had a dream in which, moved, I clutched the doorknob of my classroom while an armed teenager on the other side shouted profanities, watching students never fast enough trying to get out of my window. I was just buying them time. Buying them time. It seems like hyperbole, this response. It feels irrational, overwrought to be imagining myself and my students in such a horrible situation, to be taking measures daily against such an eventuality, to be drawing on about it. But we've all seen the footage, haven't we? We all know the numbers, right? 9 shootings in 9 weeks. 9 shootings in schools where someone other than the shooter was killed. 17 dead at Stoneman Douglas, 20 dead in Sandy Hook, 15 dead at Columbine. On the inside of those classroom doors, standing in front of teenagers whom I love, the horrible possibility is all too real. In Parkland, teachers enacted those plans that they had only imagined, in case of the unimaginable, but 14 children and 3 adults still died. In Perry Hall, Maryland, where I went to high school, a guidance counselor launched himself onto the body of a screaming 16-year-old with a loaded rifle as he sent bullets through the air of the cafeteria. At Sandy Hook Elementary, teachers filled cabinets intended for Elmer's glue and stickers with 6-year-olds trembling and silent. Do you know how hard it is to get a 6-year-old to be silent? But it wasn't hyperbole, not for those children. It was real. It wasn't unimaginable. It was happening. And it happens over and over and over again. My 9th grade class reads a book called The Giver. One of the lessons from that novel is that sometimes not deciding is deciding. We talk about how that works, how not deciding can be a way of deciding. We talk about how moms in the room, all the way that they do choose not to decide and inherently decide, right? When they don't decide to clean their bedrooms, they're actually deciding not to clean their bedrooms. They're deciding to ignore their mom's pleas and the big mess and all of the sensible house rules. They've actually decided not to take care of that important business, haven't they? And by not deciding, they get to maintain comfortable, comforting self-delusions. It's not that they said no to such a reasonable request. They're not unreasonable or uncaring or selfish or indifferent. They just never got around to deciding to act. In The Giver, people are being murdered in secret to maintain the illusion of peace and harmony in their fictional community. The protagonist at one crucial point comes to acknowledge that by doing nothing to stop this, he is complicit in those deaths. Ninth graders really get this. They are just becoming painfully aware of what hypocrisy means. At what point are we complicit in the deaths of children, teenagers, students murdered in our schools? At what point are we responsible for 6-year-olds crouched in a cabinet too afraid to cry? At what point is it on us? I love my job. I love my students even more. And I was a little afraid to speak out today, sort of announcing myself to the world like this, but at some point, inaction becomes action. I don't ever want to have to use the bungee cords wrapped around my door or the hammer in the cabinet by my window. I don't want any of my students to ever have to fumble with my keys as their sweaty fingers try to lock a door with the unimaginable on the other side. I don't even want to think for a moment about any of this. It's easy to think of it as something that just happens in other schools, other places, something that will never, could never happen here. To blame anything, to lay fault anywhere, to make it impossible in my mind that my own 2 toddlers might grow up motherless because of a person with a gun in my school. But until we take action, and the country takes action, the possibility that an armed intruder might come through my door to shoot me, to shoot the teenagers I love so much, is on me. It's on every one of us now. And to pretend otherwise is simply dangerous. So it's time to decide. And it's time to take action. So today, I hope everyone standing in front of me decides to decide. I hope everyone in front of me, standing in front of me, walks over to that stand, manned by my students, and registers to vote. I hope every single one of you, except those of you who are minors, in this audience votes in May and in November and in every election after that. You are the constituents. Your voice is your weapon. Use it. Today, I hope everyone standing in front of me pledges to hold politicians accountable for their votes. To tell them that our lives and our children's lives are more valuable than NRA dollars. Today, I hope everyone standing in front of me carefully and seriously considers and reconsiders their position on the place of firearms in our country. Our Second Amendment is real and valid, and I am not standing here asking to abolish it. I am not standing here hoping to invade anyone's homes, to confiscate guns used wisely and carefully for defensible purposes by good people. But I have been working in a school for 7 years, and every year it gets a little more likely that I will be shot there. That's not the kind of protection the Second Amendment seeks. Let me be clear, and maybe I should have teachers in the audience raise their hands too. Let me be clear. I would not have Congress arm us, right? putting a gun in my hands is not the solution. Trust me. I would have Congress expand background checks and implement psychological evaluations as a mandate for gun ownership. I would have Congress enact stricter age restrictions for firearm purchases. I would have Congress place limitations on magazine sizes. Yes! I would have Congress ban bump stocks. Yes! Here we go, guys. And I would have Congress ban assault-style weapons like the one purchased legally by Nicholas Cruz to murder 14 children and their teachers, coaches, and administrators, send 14 more to the hospital with bullets in their bodies, and traumatize hundreds more, having borne witness to that horror. I would have Congress decide finally to do something to prevent these tragedies. Because if they do not, and if we do not, next time, and without action, there will be a next time. The blood is on our hands. Thank you. But really, these teenagers, guys, clap for them.
Isn't she cool? Yeah, I'm going to be announcing my run in the 2020 presidential election. Next up, Asia Wittenberger is speaking. She's a senior at Boiling Springs High School who organized the Social Issues Club.
Hello. Thank you for coming to this rally in the wake of yet another mass shooting tragedy. He mentioned this already, but I would like to say, yes, I do go to Boiling Springs instead of Carlisle, yet nonetheless, I am excited to be speaking today alongside Carlisle students I've met before and those who I'm meeting for the first time in my life. It is hard to figure out why anyone would shoot another person, even worse when it is multiple people all at once. What happened in Florida was done by a 19-year-old man. Yes, a man. Not a kid like how many media outlets and conversations we have been sounding. He was old enough to know exactly what he did when he pulled the trigger, killing 17 people and injuring 17 others at Stoneman Douglas High School. It was a terrible, horrible decision on his part, and we often wonder what leads people to act this way. So the question is, why is it every single time a mass shooting occurs, especially by a white man? Because we know if this was a Muslim person or a black male, that these words would be different. Why is it that we use the words mental illness and mental health every single time this happens? He knew what he was doing. Nicholas Cruz knew what he was doing. It was premeditated. He is now pleading guilty. And when he saw his guardians for the first time after he killed all these people, he said sorry. He knew. Most mass shooters are fully mentally aware of what they are doing in that moment and have had these attacks planned way ahead of time. Something surprising for some to hear is that most mass shooters do not have a mental illness, or at the very least, were never diagnosed. To claim every single time a mass shooting occurs that the perpetrator had a mental illness is dangerous, and it stigmatizes the millions of Americans with mental illnesses. According to Jeffrey Swanson, representing the National Institute of Health, if all mental illnesses were to disappear, they would only go down by about 4%. That shows that mental illness is not the issue with these tragedies. Those with mental illnesses are actually far more likely to fall victim to gun violence by able-minded people than the opposite, and vice versa. And why are those words only heard with mass shootings? Why not with other violent crimes like domestic abuse or sexual assault? Mental illness is not a scapegoat to essentially forgive someone of their horrible actions. Hold these mass shooters accountable for their actions. I'm tired of living in an era where kids around my age, a little bit older and younger than I, are afraid of how my day at school will go. To the Stoneman Douglas High School victims, your lives being cut too short could have been prevented with sensible, common sense gun control. Please call your representatives and your senators and let your thoughts on events like this and other events be heard. Register to vote. If you will be 18 by election day this year, register to vote. We're young, but that doesn't mean that we don't know what we're talking about. We're educated beyond belief and more than generations before us. We're awake and we're aware and we're the future of this world. And student lives should matter more than this country's guns. Thank you.
She's cool too. A well-respected community member who some of you might have heard of is speaking up next. His name is Alan Howe. Please give him a warm welcome.
I've got to tell you, I don't want to speak up for these kids, and I don't want to speak on this topic. Before I start my prepared remarks, I want to ask you to consider something. I want you to recall the images you saw after the 9/11 attack. I want you to remember how that galvanized the nation and gave us a unity of purpose in dealing with the threat that we faced. And I want you to compare that to the images that we see after these mass shootings. Sterile images of schools, of churches. Now I know that seeing images like that, rather than seeing, for example, a blood-stained altar or a classroom door riddled with bullet holes, protects your mental state, your emotions from harm. But I also know that they protect the NRA. So consider, maybe we should see just a little bit more. The NRA has made it perfectly clear. You are either with the NRA or you are with the kids of Parkland. The NRA will not let you be with both. For years, I pleaded with my gun-owning friends to support reasonable actions like universal background checks. I warned them that if we did nothing to reduce the number of mass shootings, we would reach a tipping point where those who do not own guns would swamp gun owners. I told them that just as I helped professionalize the U.S. Air Force by removing people who do not belong there, we need to professionalize the gun-owning community by excluding those who should never touch a gun. Many of my gun-owning friends flatly refuse to consider any actions, no matter how reasonable. So, many mass shootings later, we are at that tipping point. I have zero sympathy with gun owners who refuse to act after past mass shootings.
Right.
I have zero sympathy with the NRA. I am 100% with the kids of Parkland, and I hope they get everything they are asking for.
Yeah.
Members of Congress, your thoughts and prayers are meaningless. Your sympathy for the victims of the Parkland massacre is meaningless. Any action you take that does not directly reduce the danger of more mass shootings is meaningless. We think your failure to act is heartless and cruel, and we pray that you are removed from office. It bears repeating that groups like Moms Demand Action and Every Town for Gun Safety and the kids from Parkland and from schools around the nation, including schools right here, did not organize because they are upset that people hunt. They did not organize because they are upset that people are poking holes in paper with bullets. They did not organize to destroy the Second Amendment or to take away everyone's guns. They organize because they are sick and tired of idiots with guns shooting our children. I am sick and tired of idiots with guns shooting our children, and I need you to be sick and tired of idiots with guns shooting our children. And I need you to act. Everyone must act. Congress must act.
Up next, we have Colin Willard, who's a senior at Carlisle High School, and he's been helping to plan both this rally and the walkout that's happening in a few days.
Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. Before I get started, I just wanted to take a moment and thank all of you for coming out here today. It's so great to see so many different faces, so many different ages, so many different races. It's so awesome to see all of you out here today. So give yourselves a hand, really. As Americans, we've seen an unprecedented and unparalleled amount of gun violence strike our country. We've been forced to live with the fear of being the next victim in one of the hundreds of mass shootings that occur each year in this country. But that's just it. We would just be the next victim, the next chain of events, the next death. Part of a statistic on every national news station over the next 48 hours, and included in the thoughts and prayers of millions across the country, and then only to disappear into oblivion. Quite honestly, I am absolutely tired of thinking like this. I'm tired of seeing the news reports, the tweets, the op-ed articles. Gun violence is an epidemic in this country, and change is not just needed at this point, it is vital. Britain experienced mass shootings in 1987 that resulted in 17 dead, and again in 1996 that resulted in 18 deaths. As a result, they changed their policy to restrict access to high-caliber weapons, then ban guns altogether. Germany experienced 2 mass shootings as well, 16 dead in 2002 and again in 2009 when 15 died. They changed their policies, limiting access to guns and mandating how guns are stored. Australia experienced a mass shooting that resulted in the death of 35 in 1996. They overhauled their policies, restricting semi-automatic weapon access and instituting a buyback program. These countries saw something terrible occur and they made a change. Now, is their solution perfect? Will it prevent every future homicide? Of course not. But the point is, they saw an issue and they addressed it. And I cannot say the same for the U.S.
Right.
When Americans were attacked at Pearl Harbor, we did something. When Americans were taken hostage in Iran, we did something. When terrorists took over a plane and flew it into the World Trade Center, we did something. Our reactions to these situations were by no means perfect, but our legislators and our government officials saw the issue and they took action. I cannot say the same for mass shootings. When 32 people are killed on a college campus, you do something to make sure it doesn't happen again. When 27 elementary school students and teachers are killed at their school, you do something to make sure it doesn't happen again. When 49 people are shot and killed in a nightclub, you do something to make sure it doesn't happen again. When 58 are shot and killed at a concert, you do something to make sure it doesn't happen again. When 25 people are shot and killed during a church service, you do something to make sure it doesn't happen again. And when 17 high school students and faculty are shot and killed, you do something to make sure it happens again. Thoughts and prayers won't stop future mass shootings. They haven't stopped them in the past, and they won't stop them in the future. The inaction that we've seen from our legislators is unacceptable, and I will tolerate it no longer. Enough is enough! We live in a democratic nation where the people have the power. That power lies in the right to vote and the right to express our beliefs. If you see the injustice that is striking our country, and if you see the inaction from our elected officials, and you believe that this is damaging to the future of our country, then use your voice, be loud, and be passionate. Students at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas have used their voices. They've held a nationally televised town hall with U.S. senators. They've gone to Tallahassee to lobby to their state government, and they've accrued hundreds of thousands of retweets, spreading their word across the nation. They've set the precedent for the rest of us to follow. So let's make sure this inaction doesn't happen again. To Senator Pat Toomey, I hope you hear the voices of the citizens of Carlisle and the many others across our great state. I want you to know that we are tired of the inaction orchestrated by you and your peers. I hope you listen to your constituents. We want action. We want you to make it happen. To Senator Bob Casey, Mr. Casey, you've taken action to prevent terrorists from buying guns. We want more. Be vocal, be a leader in your field. Your constituents think that the frequency of mass shootings is a pressing issue for the future of our country. Listen to us and take action. And to Carlisle's new representative, Congressman Scott Perry. Mr. Perry, you're up for re-election this year. You don't represent a district in which your victory is guaranteed anymore. Your opponents, hear your voices. Just spoke before me. He understands our concerns, realizes the inaction that isn't acceptable. And if you ignore us, we're going to do everything in our power to ensure that you will not be our representative in a few months. Inaction is not a solution. We cannot continue on this path. I've been raised in a society in which mass shootings have become normalized, and I don't want the same for my future children. Enough is enough. If you agree with myself and my fellow speakers, I urge you to hit the polls later this year and hit them hard. Cast your vote for candidates who refuse to tolerate inaction. We have a voice, we are strong, and we can change this country. It's time to get to work. Thank you.